In today's episode of Locked On Pistons podcast, I'm answering all the questions that you guys sent in to be talked about on today's episode, such as what kind of expectations should you have for Cade Cunningham this coming season? We'll talk about that in today's episode of the Locked On Pistons podcast.
You are Locked On Pistons, your daily Detroit Pistons podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's the deal? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Pistons podcast. Per usual, I'm your host, Kuka Hill. You can find me over on Twitter at Kuka Hill. I want to thank you guys for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. Free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. You'll hear more about Game Time a little bit later. So like I said in the cold open, this is going to be a mailbag episode where I answer all the questions that you guys sent in for today's episode. Moving forward, like I told you guys in the last episode, if there's any specific type of episode you guys want recorded, whether that be a guest you guys like on the episode, whether it be a certain conversation had on an episode, whether it's a certain theme you'd like to have on an episode, whatever your idea is, if you want it on an episode during the off season, during this, let's just be honest, dead part of the off season, let me know in the comment section down below or over on Twitter at Kuka Hill, and we can try to get it done for you guys. I want to do whatever you guys want to hear, obviously during this time of the off season. So again, let me know. But I got a lot of questions this week. Surprising to me, I'm not gonna lie, because let's just be honest, like I said, it is a pretty dead part of the offseason, which with transactions, stuff actually happening. But still quite a few questions. And one of the main questions I got, I'm not gonna shout out any one person because I got it from a lot of people. It was basically, what are expectations? What are realistic, fair expectations to have for Cade Cunningham this coming season? And one of the questions actually was, is it fair for me to expect Cade to be an all-star this coming season? And we might spend the majority of this first segment just talking about that part, or this question, I should say, because I think at this point, once Cade signs a a rookie max contract, he technically, I feel like a lot of people knew he had the keys to the franchise before this, but once you do that, you really do just have the keys. The keys to the franchise are yours. You have to lead this team back to, stardom. You have to bring them back. Now, again, before the contract, that was the case still, but once you get that contract, it's official. And it's not just official with Pistons fans. It's official with the NBA fan base. It's official with the NBA community. It's official with NBA media. Once you get that contract, everyone is looking at you to get this done, to be worth that contract. So for the initial question of, is it fair to assume or to expect Cade to be an all-star this year? Yes. Yes, it's fair to say that he should be an all-star this season. Now, initially, I wanted to say, okay, well, it kind of depends on if the team is not the worst in the league, then sure. But if they're still not winning a lot of games, it's going to be tougher to make an all-star game. However, look, and this is coming from someone who I've had Cade's brother on the podcast. We just had Ashton, his cousin, his trainer, on the podcast. Cade is a super cool dude, and I am one of Cade's biggest fans. I believe in him I think his ceiling is through the roof. Despite that, I do have to say the team cannot be as bad as they were last year. They can't be they may not make the play-in because you do need a team for that. But you should not be a bottom 2-3 team if Cade can be what I think he can be this year. If he can be an all-star, if he is actually going to be like a bona fide all-star player that takes this next jump, he should be able to get this team out of the bottom 3. So the team record should be removed somewhat. Now, if there's a team, that's like on a 60-win pace and they get like 4 all-stars and that kind of takes away from Cade's spot, then okay, whatever. Like if you have a Hawks situation where like Kyle Korver gets he gets a spot because of their team record. Like if he just gets scrunched for numbers because some other team's doing so great, they want to give like 4 guys, the nod, then okay, that's different. But like, I don't think that, Cade, he's playing he's playing well, but they're the worst team in the league. We can't give it to him. I don't think that can be a fair excuse for it this year, because I think he has to lead the team to some level of success. And I do think that the team around him is better this year if the coaching staff actually utilizes it. Like if they actually play him with the spacing, which I think we all expect it to happen. There's better routes, I would say, to functional lineups. Last year, you could make some functional lineups, but it just wasn't. It was hard to do so. There weren't that many routes to doing so. People can say and scream all they want about just play Jaden Ivey. Just playing Jaden Ivey more wasn't solving this team's issue this past year. I'm sorry to break it to you. Just playing Jaden Ivey was just not going to solve everything. There was a lot of problems with this team this past year. And there just weren't a lot of routes with the coaching staff you had, along with the roster that was put together, which is why both the GM and the coach is gone. There just weren't that many routes to, building it. This year, there should be more routes to putting a good lineup on the floor, to having spacing on the floor, to having adequate, I don't know what else to say, but adequate lineups. I like that's as simple as that. They have routes to doing that. So he should be able to lead this team to more wins this year because of how good I think he will be. So yes, I think fair expectations for Cade this year is to be an all-star, to not just play like an all-star, but to get votes as an all-star this year. And I don't think that's unfair at all. I think Cade has those type of expectations. I think his team has that type of expectations. And I think they welcome. I mean, Cannon was on the podcast. He said before, Ashton was just on the podcast. He said it as well. And it's one of the things that really has me, why I believe in Cade and his growth is they want the pressure. He accepts the pressure and he wants to improve. He wants to get there. He doesn't want people to take it easy on him and not have these crazy expectations. He welcomes it because he wants those expectations himself. So, yeah, I think expectations this year, he should be an all-star. He has to – I think he needs to be an all-star this year. As far as just, numbers thrown out, I think I said on the podcast with Ashton that I would want, I think he can get 25 points a game, 8 assists, 4.5 rebounds, right around where he's been at. It's more so just the shooting splits, be around 46% from the field goal from the floor, around 37% from deep, 87% from the free throw line. Does it get slightly more efficient? Draw more free throws. I think that's a big thing. Draw more free throws. Get to around 25 plus points per game. Stay around your 8 assists a game. I think that will get him an all-star nod as long as the team isn't terrible. Which if he can do that, I don't see how the team can be as bad as it was this past year, because of the roster they have put around him this upcoming year. I don't think the roster is amazing. Don't get that wrong. I don't think they went out and made crazy improvements this offseason. I just think they've made improvements from being the worst team in the league, the worst team in franchise history. They're not going to be that. It's just I can't see that possibly happening. So, and they should be. I don't think they should be a bottom 3 team either. If that's the case, something must have went wrong. But yeah, that's my answer to that question. I spent a lot of the first segment talking about that, but I felt like that was a pretty. A lot of people asked it, and it's a heavy question. I think a lot of people want to hear about it. We'll answer one more question before we move on. And we dive into the rest of the podcast. So this one was asked by, I just lost it. Where'd it go? I just scrolled too far down. Oh, here it is. This one was from Luis Jimenez. Asked, thinking about the possibility of us making the play-in this year, what teams in the East do you realistically see having a better, or seeing the Pistons have a better record than? So let's go look at the Eastern Conference this past year. And like everyone knows, the Pistons were at the very bottom. Here are some teams I think it's fair to say the Pistons should be better than. The Wizards, the Nets, that's 2 immediately. And then I think there are a few toss-ups after that, like Toronto, maybe. Charlotte, Charlotte is a tricky one because I think with Melo just staying healthy and Brandon Miller getting better, I think they can be good. They have 2 guys, and maybe even 3. They have a few guys I really like. But Charlotte is a toss-up. Toronto is a toss-up. Atlanta, although I really like Trey, but Atlanta is a possibility. Chicago, like I mentioned, that's a possibility. So I think there's just 2 for sure outright they should be better than. I would say Brooklyn and Washington. And then outside of that, I think there's about 3 or 4 teams that they could be in the mix with, which, if you're doing the math correctly, you'll realize that if they were better than the 2 teams I say for sure, and then they somehow end up at the top of the 3 to 4 other teams, that would put them right at 10th, which would put them in the play-in. So I think the play-in is a slight possibility, a slight one, just a very slight one. I don't expect it. I do expect them to be better than the Wizards and the Nets. And then I would say it's probably likely they'll be better at least than one or two of those teams I mentioned. Maybe not all four, but maybe likely at least one or two. So where they would be probably like 12th in the East, maybe 11th, something like that. And I do think that will, I think if they end up like that, where they're actually fighting for the play-in at the end of the year, I think fans will probably be happy with that. Even if it ends up with them not eventually making it, I think fans would probably be happy with that. So let me know in the comment section down below how you guys feel about the first two questions that we answered here. Would that be an acceptable season? Is that a fair expectation of Cade Cunningham this year? Let me know, comment section down below or over on Twitter @KookaHill. Coming up, really some more interesting questions, such like, what do I think is the ceiling of all the recent Piston lottery picks? Can't wait to talk about that one coming up. Passion, drive, and patience. Their formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or you'll get your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices that you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers at ebaymotors.com. So I want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We're free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. All right, so this question was asked by a friend of the podcast. We've had him on the podcast before. Our friend Jack Kelly, who does a lot of work over at the NBL, covers the NBL league. Obviously, he has a lot of Pistons content as well that he does. He has his own YouTube channel, Pistons Intellect. Make sure you go follow him and check him out over there if you have not already. Like I said, we've had Jack on the podcast. He does a lot of great content, really good visual content when it comes to graphics and stuff on Twitter. But he asked the question. He says, rank the Pistons' current lottery picks in order from 1 to 5 based on their potential ceiling. So number 1, I have Cade Cunningham. Number 2, I have Asar Thompson. Number 3, I'll put Jalen Duren. Number 4, I'll put Ivy, and 5, I'll put Holland. I think that would be my order. I almost went Holland over Ivy, but I think Ivy. Okay, so let's explain let's start at the top first. Okay, I don't think Cade's much disputed. I think Asar is right after him. I think that's pretty clear. I don't think I'll have much pushback against that. I have Duren over Ivy because if Duren simply improves defensively, he's flashed so much offensively that could be like incredible. And he's only 20. Like he's much younger and he's flashed more at a younger age. Whereas it quite literally is if he can just improve defensively. Now, again, that is a huge ask. Who knows if that actually will happen? But he's young enough to where he's flashed enough offensively to where if you wanted to say, look, he dude's 20 years old, in 2 to 3 years, if he's better defensively, like that's a monster. Like I completely understand that. So that's why I have him over Ivy. I'll have Ivy over Holland because Ivy has flashed, I would say, more shooting upside, obviously. I think he's going to get to the paint more. I think he's obviously flashed more playmaking-wise. Even though his finishing hasn't been good in the NBA thus far, I think he's flashed more offensively as a scorer, obviously. Even though Holland obviously has more of a two-way ceiling, I think there's more work for him to get there. I'm not sure if he will. Not rooting against him. Maybe he does, and that would be great for the Pistons. But I think that's more of a question right now. Whereas Ivy, I do think that even though I do believe he's going to be a defensive liability his entire career, that's just my belief. I don't think he's ever going to be a fine defender. I do think eventually you would expect him to eventually get to a point where he's hitting outside shots at a reasonable clip. He's getting to the paint. He's able to make enough accurate and correct reads to where he can make defenses pay with it. And eventually he gets to a point where he's finishing at, a better level. Like, and that right there is at least like a sixth man, scorer off the bench. Like, I think he has I guess I'm describing more of a floor rather than a ceiling. Because I guess you would then argue that, well, if Holland can get his jump shot right, his two-way ability with his athleticism should have him with a higher ceiling. I just don't think that you can just say, well, you can't just give every player every skill possible and say, oh, well, if they have that, then they have a higher ceiling. I want operating like the realistic ceiling. Well, I would say like it's a realistic ceiling. And as of right now, I still would have Ivy over Holland. We haven't even seen Holland in the NBA, so Holland's going to be last for me. And I just think there's a lot more to work on with him. But, I'd have Ivy fourth and then Holland 5. So that would be my answer. I want to hear from you guys. I know that probably is going to be one that gets argued about. My goodness. Gets argued about a lot in the comment section of this episode, especially the Ivy topic. I know that Ivy has a very strong and loud fan base. So I know people are probably going to disagree with me having him 4, but that's how I feel. I'll have Duren over him. I feel pretty confident with that. Move on to the next question. This one is from on Twitter. Return of the Bad Boys asked me, since Stu has added to his game every summer, what did he add this year? I'm going to go ahead and say that I don't think he added anything new this upcoming year. I think he just improves upon some other stuff that he did add, like his three-point shooting. I think his three-point shooting may get better. I think he may get a little better with making reads with the ball in his hands. That's something he flashed a little bit this past year. I think maybe he improves on that. I don't know if you're going to see him just completely add, all of a sudden you see him doing ISO stuff. Like, no, I don't see that happening. I don't think all of a sudden you're going to see him, all of a sudden he's going to be a fantastic DHO guy. I don't know if that's something he's ever going to be that great at. Like, I don't think he's going to, and maybe he proves me wrong, because like you mentioned, he's added something every single year. So maybe he does again. But I think it's probably more likely now at this point that he just improves upon stuff that he's added and kind of gets better in those areas rather than add something completely new. I don't think that's what will happen this year. But if it does, I mean, I can't say I'd be incredibly shocked because he has gotten better each year. I just think I think he'll be better this year, just as, improving upon things rather than add a new thing to your game. If that makes sense, if you guys get what I'm saying. Next question will be from Rob Fritz. The question is, which player is most likely to exceed the fan base's expectation this season? That's a good one. I'm not going to say Cade. There's two guys that I think of when I'm answering this question. So one of them, I want to initially say Tobias, simply because, I feel like Tobias has, I feel like people are just saying, and thinking too badly of Tobias. And I like I said, for the whole offseason, I don't totally get it. I'm not saying he's an all-star, but people act like he sucks. I don't get, I don't understand that. So I want to say Tobias for that reason. The other player that I would throw out there, if you don't want to say Tobias because he's a veteran and you expect what you expect what you've seen from him in the last few years. If that's what you want to say, fair enough. You don't want to say Tobias, okay. The next player I'll say is Asar Thompson. I think Asar has a chance to really shock some people this year. And like we've talked about a lot on the podcast recently, I don't think it's going to be his outside shot. I think it's going to be his ball handling. If he improves his ball handling, and that was a focus, which I'm hoping it was. I know they're focusing on his shooting too, but his ball handling, I really do believe should be taken priority first. If he improves as a ball handler, all of a sudden you're seeing him being that secondary initiator. You're seeing him out there playing with Cade as the 2 guard, and now they have a whole lineup of guys taller than Cade. They can switch on defense, and all of a sudden you're seeing Ausar get to the basket, kick out. You're seeing him run pick and rolls. You're seeing him get into the rim more. You're seeing him finish at the rim more if his ball handling gets better, because I do believe that's the main reason why he is not I would say, an absolute top tier finisher. Has more to do with that. I think so much stuff will unlock, and he will take a really big jump if his ball handling improves rather than his shot. So I think Ausar has that chance. I do think he'll get those reps. Maybe not as much as I want. We'll see. But I do think those reps will come as a playmaker, as an on-ball initiator. And if those do come and he has improved his playmaking with the processing that he has, with his passing vision, with his passing accuracy, with his ability to pass with either hand, with his ability to read defenses and anticipate, like all that, if his ball handling improves where you can take advantage of that stuff, I think he'll have and I really do think he'll have an excellent season. So I think Tobias, and if I can't say that one because he's a veteran, you guys think I'm taking an easy way out, I'll say Ausar. That will be what I go with there. But let me know, again, comment section down below or over on Twitter @KukaHill. What do you guys think? Who do you guys pick to have to exceed expectations? How would you rank the Pistons lottery picks 1 through 5 based on their ceiling? Do you think Stu will add something completely new to his game this offseason? Let me know. Comment section down below or over on Twitter @KukaHill. When we come back, if I had to choose one of Ivy, Duren, Holland to have a breakout season, who would I pick? Who would you guys pick? We'll talk about that coming up. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to the first pitch. With killer last-minute deals and all-in prices viewed from your seat and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. I've said this many times. I'm a procrastinator. I wait to the last second with quite literally everything, and it screws me over when I'm purchasing tickets, but not with Game Time because they have last-minute deals. You can save up to 60% of buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, any type of event near you. It absolutely saves someone like me. I don't end up getting screwed out of having a bad seat or having to buy bad tickets that cost way too much. Game Time saves me. It absolutely saves me. That's why I love it. Another great thing about Game Time, you can see the view from your seat in the app. You don't have to buy the tickets, get there, and be like, oh, I didn't expect this. No, you see right in the app what your seat will look like, so you can choose whether that's a good seat or whether it's not a good seat. You can move on to another ticket. So Game Time, I love it. I think it will save all of you guys a lot of time as well. You should download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed with Game Time. So I want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We're free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel @Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. All right, this question is from Ausar Pick and Roll on Twitter. Asked if you had, and he was on the podcast earlier this offseason as part of the fan episodes. Shout out to him. But if you had to choose one of Ivy, Duren, Ausar, maybe even Holland to have an absolute breakout season, who would you pick to benefit the team the most? So since I talked about Ausar this past segment, I'm going to take Ausar off this because my answer would be Ausar. But since we just talked about Ausar, I'll leave it to Ivy, Duren, and Holland. I think by far, easily, like not even close, if I had to pick one to have a breakout season that would benefit the team the most, it's Duren. It's Jalen Duren by far. Because if he does make a jump defensively, that changes everything. Like quite literally, it changes so many things for the Pistons if Duren takes a step defensively. Because that was a major, really huge part of why the Pistons were so bad this past year. Because he was awful defensively. If he takes a step defensively, this team will be quite a bit better. Like just having him get better defensively would be instant, quite a few wins added. And that's not even taking into account like adding Tobias and adding Tomato Jr. and adding Malik Beasley. Like Duren developing defensively, I think is probably the most important development on this team right now. If you want to talk about what would benefit instantly the most, it's him defensively. Now, we'll see this year. Is it possible? Can he get better defensively? Is that something he has in him? We'll see this year. I think if he doesn't, I think it'll be a very interesting trade deadline for the Pistons. If he does, I think the Pistons will make a lot of fans happy this year when it comes to win-loss record. So I think a lot of it really does hinge on him defensively. So I think it's easily Jalen Duren in that regard. Next question we have for the podcast. This one's from, I'm not going to pronounce it. I don't know. It's just like a bunch of random letters. I think you're trolling with your Twitter name, so I'm never going to say it. But the question is, watching the Olympics, I have to wonder. I love Cade, but is Franz Wagner the best player from that draft? Look, I've been seeing this a lot, not in the Pistons community, but in the NBA community. People creating takeaways from watching Olympic basketball. I don't get why people do that. I think it's really foolish and makes no sense to me at all. Like, I take nothing from Olympic basketball, basically, for the NBA when it comes to that. You're playing against completely different competition. You're playing against different type of competition. You're playing a different type of game. Like, it's a different type of basketball. You're playing different measurements when it comes to the three-point line. Like, playing against different rules. Playing with different people. Like, everything's completely different. And plays completely different than NBA basketball. So I don't have any takeaways. Like, as far as Olympic basketball, okay, yeah, you can take away for that. But like trying to bring takeaways from the Olympics to the NBA, like, it doesn't make sense to me. I don't do it. I'm not going to. Like, it doesn't. One way I guess you could is if you've seen a few times, like a foreign player for a different team plays exceptionally well against the United States and plays really well outside of that as well. Maybe they get a contract with the NBA team. Like, I can get that. But like an NBA player, like playing different in the Olympics, you expect them to do it in the NBA? Like, it just, no, I don't read into the Olympics like that. I view it as a different entity and just enjoy it for that. Like, nothing else is, I don't take anything else from that. The next question is from Archie. It says, I feel Cade's number one item to address is conditioning. Do you agree it should be his major focus? I think there's other things. I think there's multiple things that Cade needs to improve on. I think he needs to improve getting to the line more. I think he needs to sell calls more. I think he needs to learn how to draw free throws better. I think I'd like to see him continue to improve on his outside shot. But yeah, basically, yes, I do agree that it should be one of his major focuses. I do believe he was getting tired by the fourth. And whether that was because he was carrying such a usage or because, again, it was his first season back from major injury. So maybe his conditioning wasn't the best. Like, that certainly possibly was the case. Either way, he does need his conditioning to be better to where he's not getting tired in the fourth. So, yeah, I do think it should be a major focus. Whether it's a top focus, I don't know. But, yeah, it should be one of the main focuses. I do agree with that. And I think by working on that, you will address other ones. Like, I think addressing conditioning will also help, like, in that regard, potentially, like, his explosiveness. Like, I'm sure, like, that kind of goes hand in hand a little bit in the offseason when you're working on it. But yeah, I do agree. It should be a major focus. I'd be scrolling past questions and completely. I had a lot of questions, by the way, actually, that I'm not going to answer. I had a lot of questions for like early favorites for the 2025 NBA draft. Guys, if you've been listening to the podcast for a minute, you know I hate college basketball and I don't like draft season. We do draft coverage. I've been getting into it when that time comes. I do get into it for draft coverage to be able, scout prospects and give my opinions on those guys. But outside of that, you guys know I don't watch college basketball. I think it's terrible. I hate watching college basketball. I think it's a bad product. I think it's bad basketball. And I'm not going to watch it unless I absolutely have to. So, no, I don't have any idea right now. Outside of like Cooper Flag, I have no idea about anything else with the draft next year. I'm not looking that far ahead for that. When the time comes, I get disappointed because that's not my favorite part. It's not one of my favorite parts of the season. Another question I got from Gary Perry says, will Ron Holland be on the Pistons roster or Motor City Cruise for the most of the season? This is a very hot topic in the Pistons community. I don't know why it's that controversial to talk about this. and to have an opinion on either side. Ron Holland is 18, 19 years old. Extremely young, extremely raw, on a team that just had the worst season in Pistons history, on a team that just added like 3 or 4 wings to the team at his position that's going to get minutes. There are returning players that are going to be getting minutes around his position. Like, to have the opinion that he will probably spend time in the Motor City Cruise to get minutes, I don't see how that's a controversial take. That's where I'm leaning right now. Like, there's just a lot of people. Like, if he does play, will I be shocked? No. Like, the Pistons have played all of their recent top picks, so it won't be shocking to me if he plays as well. Like, I'm not saying it's like out of the realm of possibility, but if I had to take a guess, I'm not sure he's going to play over some guys. I don't know if you want him playing over some guys when it seems like this season is more about taking a step. I think they want to improve win-loss wise this year. I think it's, if I had to take a guess and put my money on something, I would say he's going to spend some time with the Motor City Cruise, but I won't be shocked either way, I guess. And we'll wrap up the podcast with this question. This one's from Igor. He says, why should we believe that the spacing with THA and Beasley will be better than what we had with Burks and Bogdanovich? I think that's a really fair question. I don't think it's going to be from, how do I want to say this? I don't think it's THJ and Beasley that's the major difference maker. I think it's Tobias. I think having a 4 that can space the floor and is a legit scoring threat, I think that's where the difference happens. I think then when you add on top of that Beasley and THJ taking the place, not just, them taking minutes from Bojan and Burks, but them replacing the minutes of Livers, them replacing the minutes of Killian Hayes, them replacing the minutes of, I was going to say some of the guys they acquired after the deadline, but a lot of those guys were just like end of bench guys, potentially even, and now I know fans may not want this, but if it happens, Beasley or THJ playing over an Ivy, like them taking minutes from those guys that, or, what's another one? Because I know saying Ivy just probably had everyone get a brain aneurysm and freak the hell out. But like, even, I'm not going to back off of that. Even if they play over Ivy, the point would be you're having more spacing on the floor. More minutes are being soaked by spacers. That would be what it is. Whereas Ivy was losing minutes this past year to a Killian Hayes, who isn't spacing the floor. If he's losing minutes to a Beasley or a THJ, that's different because now it's spacing he's losing minutes to. Even without losing minutes to Ivy or Ivy losing minutes, like I said, I think the bigger addition is the fact you have Tobias. So now you can actually run a functional lineup of, let's say, the starting lineup that I'd like to see them use, like Cade, Asar. But then now you can run Simone Fontecchio and THJ, or not THJ, Simone Fontecchio and Tobias. Now you have 2 wings that can space the floor. Now, maybe you don't start Asar Thompson. Maybe you do start Cade, Malik Beasley, Simone Fontecchio, Tobias, Duren. Now you got a straight up pick and roll, 3 shooting threats around them. It's gonna be spacing out the gym. So I think that's different. Not just like, Bojan and Burke swapping there. I do think that's a conversation that maybe we should be having on the podcast soon, because I do think there's a fair critique there. But I do think it's more about them taking minutes from some other guys that were getting minutes, along with the fact that Tobias is the bigger one because he's soaking up those minutes at the 4. And I think that's where the real impact is going to be felt. So, but that's all I've got for you guys today. Let me know in the comment section down below or over on Twitter how you guys feel about today's episode. Any questions that you guys want me to answer on a future episode of the podcast, a mailbag edition. You guys disagree, agree with my takes. Let me know, comment section down below or over on Twitter at Kuka Hill. That's all I've got for you guys today. Thank you guys for making Locked On Pistons your first listen every single day. If you're available on all your podcast platforms, hit that subscribe button to the YouTube channel. Leave us a 5-star review, whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. And until next time, I'll see you guys later. Until next time, peace out.